In 2021, I moved to Chicago for work after graduating college. I was 24, broke, and living alone in a tiny apartment on the north side that constantly smelled like radiator heat and old cigarettes no matter how much I cleaned. I worked overnight editing security footage for a logistics company downtown, which meant I usually got off around 1 or 2 in the morning. At first, I loved the city at night. The streets looked completely different after midnight. Empty intersections, flickering traffic lights, trains screeching through the dark overhead while cold wind whipped garbage across the sidewalks. It felt cinematic. That feeling disappeared after what happened on the Red Line. I still don't talk about it much because every time I do, people either think I'm lying or mentally unstable. Honestly, if someone else told me this story, I'd probably react the same way. It started in November during one of the coldest weeks of the year. I'd stayed late at work because our servers crashed, forcing everyone to manually back up footage for hours. By the time I finally left the building, it was around 1:35 a.m. Snow had started falling heavily. Not soft snow either, the sharp kind that stings your face when the wind catches it. I remember considering calling an Uber until I checked the price. $92. No chance. So I headed toward the subway station instead. The streets were mostly empty, except for a few homeless people huddled beneath storefront awnings and occasional taxis splashing through slush-covered intersections. The station entrance looked almost abandoned when I got there. One flickering fluorescent light buzzed over the stairs leading underground. The electronic arrival board claimed the next train would arrive in 4 minutes. I was alone on the platform. At least I thought I was. The station itself looked older than usual somehow. Dirtier. Dark stains along the tiled walls, water dripping steadily from pipes overhead. I sat on a bench and checked my phone while waiting. That's when I heard someone whistling. Not loudly, just soft enough to echo faintly through the tunnel. A slow, uneven tune I didn't recognize. I looked around. Nobody. The whistling stopped. A minute later, it started again, this time from farther down the platform. I stood up instinctively. Still no one. Then I noticed a maintenance worker near the far end of the station. At least I assumed he was maintenance. He wore a reflective orange jacket and stood beside the tracks holding something long in one hand, maybe a tool. His face was hidden beneath a black winter cap. What struck me immediately was how motionless he stood. Completely still, like a mannequin. I looked away for maybe 5 seconds to check the train arrival sign again. When I looked back, he was gone. I felt my stomach tighten a little. Then my phone suddenly lost signal. Not unusual underground, except I'd had full bars seconds earlier. I shoved the phone into my pocket and walked closer to the edge of the platform to look for headlights. That's when I saw something on the tracks below. A shoe. Just one. Dark red, half covered in dirty snow. I remember staring at it because it looked weirdly out of place, almost carefully positioned between the rails. Then the train arrived. The headlights appeared suddenly around the tunnel bend, accompanied by the usual screaming metal sound. The train slowed to a stop. Only one other person got on with me. A woman maybe in her 40s, wearing hospital scrubs beneath a winter coat. She looked exhausted. We sat on opposite ends of the same car while the doors closed and the train pulled away. Immediately something felt wrong. The car was too quiet. No announcements. No rattling conversations from neighboring cars. Just the low mechanical hum of the train moving through darkness. I noticed the woman glancing repeatedly toward the connecting door at the far end of the car, like she was nervous about something behind it. At first, I ignored it. Then I heard the whistling again. Same uneven tune from the station. Coming from the next car over. The woman stiffened immediately. She looked directly at me for the first time and asked quietly, "You hear that too?" I nodded slowly. She muttered, "Oh God." Before I could ask what she meant, the train lights flickered. Just once. But during that split second of darkness, I saw someone standing in the reflection of the window beside me. Tall, wearing orange, right behind my seat. I turned around instantly. Nobody there. The woman stood up immediately after seeing my reaction. "You saw him," she whispered. Not asked. Stated. I remember laughing nervously because my brain still wanted logical explanations. "Probably just somebody in the next car." The woman shook her head slowly. "No." The whistling got louder. Closer. Then came the sound of metal dragging across the floor. Shh. Slow. Deliberate. Moving through the neighboring carriage. The woman suddenly moved seats beside me. "I'm not staying alone," she said. That sentence scared me more than the noise itself. The dragging sound continued approaching the connecting door. Shh. Shh. Then it stopped. The door window at the far end of the car remained dark for several seconds. Neither of us spoke. Then something slid upward against the glass from the other side. A hand. Pale fingers smeared with black grime. The woman gasped. I stood immediately. The hand disappeared. Then came 3 knocks. Knock. 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 The lights flickered again. This time longer. And during the darkness, the whistling started directly outside the door. When the lights returned, the maintenance worker stood there staring through the window. I could finally see his face. Or what was left of it. The entire left side of his skull looked crushed inward, like it had been flattened by impact. One eye hung lower than the other. Blood covered his neck and reflective jacket in dark brown stains. In his hand was not a tool. It was a railroad spike, long and rusted. The woman screamed. The figure tilted his head slowly, then smiled. I swear his jaw cracked while doing it. The train suddenly lurched hard, throwing both of us sideways. The lights went out completely. Total darkness swallowed the car. Then came pounding footsteps. Not walking. Running. Toward us. I pulled out my phone flashlight immediately. The beam shook violently in my hand. Empty seats flashed past in the darkness. Then the light landed on the far end of the car. And the maintenance worker was somehow already inside, standing motionless in the aisle. 10 feet away, I grabbed the woman's arm, and we ran toward the opposite carriage doors. Behind us came the sound of sprinting footsteps. Way too fast. We burst through the connecting doors into the next car. Completely empty. The woman slammed the door shut while I searched desperately for an emergency intercom. Nothing worked. No signal. No response. Then the train slowed unexpectedly. Outside the windows there was no station. Only darkness. The train stopped completely seconds later. The overhead lights switched to dim emergency red, and all the doors unlocked at once with a loud click. The woman whispered, "No, no, no." Then the speakers crackled overhead. A distorted voice mumbled through static. "Track inspection in progress." The sentence repeated again and again, but each time sounding more warped, less human. Then came the whistling, now directly outside our car, moving alongside the train. I looked through the window and nearly threw up. The maintenance worker was walking beside the train in the tunnel darkness, except he shouldn't have been able to keep pace. The train sat elevated several feet above the tracks, but he glided alongside it effortlessly while staring directly at us. Then suddenly, he disappeared beneath the car. A loud metallic bang echoed underneath us. The entire train shook violently. Another bang. Closer. Like something climbing upward from below. The woman started crying quietly. I spotted an emergency exit door near the end of the carriage. Without thinking, I forced it open. Freezing air rushed inside from the tunnel. We climbed down onto the narrow maintenance walkway beside the tracks, and started running. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead under dim yellow maintenance lights. Behind us, something slammed against the train windows repeatedly. I glanced back once. The maintenance worker stood inside the carriage staring at us through the glass. Then every light inside the train shut off simultaneously. He vanished into darkness. We kept running. I remember hearing water dripping somewhere deep in the tunnel along with distant electrical buzzing. Then came the whistling again. Ahead of us this time. We froze. The tune echoed through the darkness in front of us. Impossible. A figure slowly emerged beneath the next maintenance light. Orange reflective jacket. Railroad spike hanging loosely at his side. The woman screamed. We turned and ran the opposite direction. But now another figure stood behind us too. Same jacket. Same ruined face. Same smile. My brain genuinely broke for a second trying to process it. They started walking toward us from both directions. Not rushing. Just slow, deliberate steps. Dragging railroad spikes along the concrete. The woman grabbed my arm and pointed toward a small service ladder leading upward beside the tunnel wall. We climbed immediately. At the top was a narrow, unlocked utility door leading into an abandoned maintenance room. Dust covered everything inside. Old lockers lined one wall. We shoved the door closed and held it shut while breathing heavily. For several seconds there was silence. Then, scrape. Metal dragged slowly across the opposite side of the door. The sound moved downward gradually, like someone carving into the metal. The woman was shaking uncontrollably now. She finally explained why she recognized him. About a year earlier, a subway maintenance employee had been killed during overnight repairs in that exact tunnel system. According to rumors, he'd been accidentally struck by a train after dispatch mistakenly cleared the tracks while workers were still below. His body had reportedly been dragged nearly half a mile. I wanted to believe she was making connections out of fear. But then we heard whistling again. Inside the room, soft, very close. We both turned slowly. One of the old lockers near the corner stood slightly open now. The whistling came from inside it. I shined my flashlight toward the gap. Darkness. Then the locker door creaked open wider by itself. Inside hung the orange reflective jacket. Fresh blood dripped from its sleeves onto the floor. The woman backed away immediately. That's when the locker door beside it burst open violently. The maintenance worker lunged out so fast, neither of us reacted in time. He slammed the woman against the wall with horrifying force. Her head hit concrete with a sound I still hear sometimes in my sleep. I grabbed a loose metal pipe nearby and swung blindly. The pipe connected with the side of his skull. Nothing happened. Not even a flinch. Up close, the smell coming off him was unbearable. Rotting meat mixed with oil and wet rust. His crushed eye turned slowly toward me. Then he smiled wider. I ran. I hate admitting that, but I did. I bolted through the maintenance room door and sprinted back into the tunnel alone while hearing the woman screaming behind me. Her scream stopped suddenly after maybe 5 seconds. Then silence, except for whistling. Right behind me. I ran harder than I ever have in my life. Eventually, I saw distant station lights ahead and nearly collapsed from relief. I burst onto the empty platform screaming for help. Transit police found me maybe 10 minutes later. They searched the tunnels immediately. No woman. No maintenance room. No blood. Nothing. According to transit records, there wasn't even supposed to be an accessible service room in that tunnel section anymore. It had supposedly been sealed years earlier. The police assumed I'd suffered some kind of breakdown. Maybe hypothermia. Maybe stress. But here's the part that still destroys me. A few days later, I searched online for reports about the maintenance worker accident. I found an old article. There was a photograph attached. And standing beside the dead worker in the picture was the woman from the train. The caption identified her as his wife. She'd apparently died 6 months after his accident. Suicide. Jumped in front of a subway train late at night. Ever since then, I never ride the subway after dark. But every once in a while, especially during winter, I still hear that whistling, even above ground. Sometimes while walking home alone, sometimes outside my apartment window. Always the same uneven tune. And last month, while waiting at a crosswalk downtown, I looked into the reflection of a store window beside me. Behind me stood a man in an orange reflective jacket, smiling with half his skull crushed inward, holding a railroad spike. I used to think the Manila subway system felt safer at night than the streets above it. That probably sounds stupid now. Back in 2022, I was living in Quezon City while studying multimedia design in Manila. I also worked part-time editing promotional videos for a small company in Makati. Because of my schedule, I usually got home late, sometimes past midnight. Anyone from Metro Manila knows commuting at night can feel like survival mode. Jeepneys get crowded, buses become unpredictable, and ride-hailing apps suddenly charge prices that look like airplane tickets. So whenever possible, I used the subway lines because they were faster, cleaner, and honestly less stressful. At least that's what I thought. This happened on a Friday night in August during heavy rain season. I stayed late at work because my boss dumped an emergency project on me at the last minute. By the time I finished rendering everything, it was around 11:40 p.m. Outside the office building, rain hammered the streets so hard, the entire city looked underwater. I remember thinking the subway would be my quickest option before operations ended for the night. Big mistake. The station near our office was almost empty when I arrived. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly above the entrance stairs, and rainwater dripped from the ceiling near the ticket machines. Even before I tapped my card, something about the place felt off. Too quiet. Normally, there'd still be groups of tired workers, students, security guards, vendors closing up, or at least people talking on phones. That night, nothing. Just the sound of distant train tracks humming beneath the floor. I checked the clock above the security scanner. 11:57 p.m. One last train. Perfect. Or so I thought. I headed down the escalator toward the platform and immediately noticed a woman standing near the yellow line. She wore a long gray raincoat, even though she was indoors, and her black hair hung over most of her face. At first, I barely paid attention to her. People in Manila avoided eye contact all the time. But then I realized something weird. She wasn't moving, not even slightly. No phone, no shifting posture, no blinking from what I could tell. Just standing there facing the tracks. I sat on a bench farther away and checked Facebook while waiting. Every few seconds, I glanced up instinctively. The woman remained frozen in the exact same position. After maybe 2 minutes, I noticed another thing. The platform speakers weren't making announcements anymore. No arrival notices. No reminders. No static. Just silence. That's when the lights flickered again. This time longer. The entire platform dimmed for maybe 3 seconds before returning. When the lights came back, the woman was closer to me. I never saw her walk. I remember freezing with my phone halfway in my pocket. She now stood beside a pillar maybe 15 feet away. Head tilted downward. Still not moving. I convinced myself I'd just been distracted. Maybe she walked while I looked at my phone. Still, my chest tightened. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my younger sister. "Kuya, are you still commuting?" I replied quickly. "Yeah, last train." She answered almost immediately. "Be careful. There's flooding near Cubao." While typing back, I heard something scrape across the platform floor. I looked up. The woman was now standing directly across the tracks. Impossible. There hadn't even been a train yet. She should not have been able to cross. I stood slowly from the bench. That's when I realized the opposite platform was completely dark. pitch black. The lights over there had somehow gone out without me noticing. And the woman, she was staring directly at me now. I still couldn't see her face clearly because of her hair, but I knew she was looking at me. Then the train finally arrived. The screeching sound nearly made me jump. Bright headlights flooded the tunnel as the train rolled into the station. The doors opened. I stepped inside immediately without looking back. There were only 4 other passengers in the entire carriage. An exhausted-looking nurse, 2 teenage boys asleep near the far end, and an older man reading a newspaper. That alone should have reassured me. Instead, the atmosphere inside felt wrong too. The lights buzzed overhead with that faint electrical hum you only notice when everything else is silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody even looked at each other. I sat near the middle doors and finally relaxed a little once the train started moving. I told myself I was being paranoid. The woman probably crossed using a staff walkway. The darkness on the opposite platform was probably maintenance-related. Simple explanations. Normal things. Then I noticed something reflected in the train window beside me. Someone standing behind my seat. I turned instantly. Nobody there. My heart started racing anyway. When I looked back at the reflection, I saw the woman again, standing at the far end of the carriage. Gray raincoat, head lowered, hair covering her face. I spun around so fast my backpack slipped off my shoulder. But the far end of the carriage was empty except for the sleeping teenagers. I could hear my breathing getting shaky. I remember thinking maybe exhaustion was messing with my head. I hadn't slept properly all week. Maybe I was hallucinating. Then the nurse suddenly stood up. Without saying a word, she moved to another carriage. Fast. Like she was trying not to run. The older man folded his newspaper and stared at me for a second. Not angry. Not confused. Worried. Then he also stood and exited into the next carriage before the connecting doors closed behind him. Now it was just me and the sleeping boys. At least I thought they were asleep. Until one of them slowly raised his head. His eyes looked terrified. Not sleepy. Terrified. He whispered something to the other boy. The second boy looked toward me. Then immediately toward the empty space behind my seat. Both of them got up and hurried into the next carriage too. That's when I heard breathing directly beside my ear. Wet breathing. Like someone with fluid in their lungs. I couldn't move. Every muscle locked up. The breathing continued for maybe 5 seconds, then stopped. I turned slowly. Nobody. But the seat beside me was wet. Rainwater dripped onto the floor, even though all the windows were closed. I stood immediately and moved toward the next carriage. As the doors between carriages slid open, I glanced back one last time. The woman sat in my seat. Completely motionless. Head lowered. Water pooling beneath her shoes. The doors closed before I could see more. I stumbled into the next carriage, breathing hard. The nurse, the old man, and the 2 boys were all there now. None of them looked surprised to see me. That scared me more than anything. The old man finally spoke. You saw her too? I couldn't answer immediately. I just nodded. The nurse crossed herself. One of the boys muttered quietly in Tagalog, "Akala ko ako lang." I thought it was just me. The older man sighed heavily and folded his newspaper tighter. Then he said something I'll never forget. She rides the last train. Nobody laughed. Nobody questioned him. The train continued rattling through the tunnels while rain hammered faintly above ground somewhere far away. I asked him what he meant. The old man hesitated before answering. Years ago, there was an accident during flooding season. A woman fell onto the tracks after midnight. People said security ignored her because they thought she was drunk. The nurse quietly added, she was dragged underneath the train. I felt cold all over. The old man nodded. They never fully recovered the body. The carriage lights flickered again. This time, everyone reacted. Even the boys. The old man looked toward the connecting doors nervously. Then we heard it. Knocking. 3 slow knocks against the glass door leading to the previous carriage. Knock. 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 Nobody moved. I forced myself to look through the small window. At first, I saw only darkness. Then strands of wet black hair slid slowly across the glass from the other side. The nurse started praying under her breath. One of the boys was crying quietly. The knocking came again, louder this time. Knock. 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 Then the lights went out completely. Total darkness swallowed the carriage. People screamed instantly. I heard movement everywhere. Metal rattling. Someone falling. Then came the sound that still gives me nightmares. Bare feet slapping across the floor, moving through the carriage toward us. Fast. Very fast. The emergency lights finally flickered on in dim red. And for one horrifying second, I saw her standing in the center aisle, closer than ever. Her face was finally visible beneath the hair, except it barely looked human anymore. Her jaw hung unnaturally low, skin pale gray and swollen, eyes completely white. Water poured endlessly from her mouth onto the train floor. Then the lights died again. People panicked. The boys shoved past me toward the opposite end. The nurse screamed. I felt something icy brush my arm in the darkness. Then suddenly, the train stopped. Hard. Everyone was thrown sideways as the brakes shrieked. Emergency lights flashed red overhead. We weren't at a station. The windows showed only black tunnel walls. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then the train speakers crackled to life with static. A distorted female voice whispered, "Next stop." Static swallowed the rest. Then came laughing. Wet, choking laughter. The carriage doors suddenly unlocked with a loud click. The old man immediately shouted, "Run!" I didn't question him. All of us rushed out into the tunnel. The air smelled disgusting, rust, sewage, stagnant water. Emergency tunnel lights glowed dimly along the walls. Behind us, the train doors remained open. I looked back once. The woman stood inside the carriage doorway staring at us. Except now her neck looked twisted sideways at an impossible angle. Then she stepped down onto the tracks. We ran. I could hear splashing footsteps behind us. Too fast. Way too fast. The tunnel curved ahead while the emergency lights flickered one by one. The younger boy slipped and screamed. I grabbed his arm and pulled him up. Behind us came that horrible wet breathing again. Closer. The nurse shouted that she saw a maintenance door ahead. We sprinted toward it. The old man yanked it open and practically shoved us inside before slamming it shut. We all held the door while breathing heavily. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, thud. Something hit the other side. The entire metal door shook violently. Thud. 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 The younger boy sobbed openly. The nurse kept praying. Another impact dented the metal inward slightly. Then silence. Complete silence. Nobody moved. Finally, after maybe a full minute, the old man slowly stepped away from the door. We waited. Nothing. No breathing. No knocking. No movement. Just silence again. The maintenance room was tiny and smelled like oil and dust. Emergency equipment lined the walls, and an old fluorescent light buzzed overhead. I asked the old man what we were supposed to do. He looked pale. Wait until morning. None of us slept. We just sat there listening to distant tunnel noises for hours. Around maybe 4 a.m., we finally heard workers outside. Real workers. Voices. Equipment. The old man cautiously opened the door. The tunnel looked normal again. No sign of the woman. No water. No footprints. Nothing. We were escorted back to the nearest station by railway staff. And here's where things became even worse. When we explained what happened, the station supervisor looked confused. He told us there had been no emergency stop recorded that night. No power outage. No tunnel evacuation. Nothing. According to their system, the last train completed its route normally without interruption. The old man argued with them for almost 10 minutes. Didn't matter. The logs showed no problems. Eventually, the supervisor asked something strange. He asked us to describe the woman. When we did, his face changed immediately. He became very quiet. Then he admitted something. Over the years, several passengers had reported seeing a soaked woman on the last train during heavy rainstorms. Most described the same details. Gray raincoat, long black hair, white eyes, always appearing near midnight. And almost every report happened close to the anniversary of the subway accident. I stopped using the trains after that. Completely. I'd rather spend hours in traffic than go underground again. But the story didn't end there. About 3 months later, I was waiting for a jeepney near Cubao after another late shift. Rain poured hard that night too. While standing beneath a covered sidewalk, I noticed a familiar old man across the street. The same man from the train. I started walking toward him. But before I crossed, headlights passed between us. Only for a second. When the vehicles moved again, he was gone. Completely gone. I searched everywhere nearby. Nothing. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I searched online for news articles about the subway accident. I eventually found one archived forum discussing it. There was an attached, blurry newspaper clipping showing victims and witnesses connected to the incident years earlier. And there he was. The old man. Same face. Same clothes. Except the article was dated 2009. And according to the article, he died during the tunnel evacuation after the accident. I remember staring at my phone for almost 5 minutes, unable to breathe properly. I tried convincing myself it was someone who merely looked similar. But deep down, I knew better. Especially after what happened last week. I still work in Manila sometimes, though now I leave much earlier. But last week, during another storm, I passed by a subway entrance while heading home. The station was nearly empty again. And standing near the bottom of the escalator was the old man. He looked directly at me, then slowly raised one finger to his lips, like a warning to stay quiet. The lights flickered, and beside him, descending from the darkness below the station, I saw the woman in the gray raincoat climbing upward toward the street.